In today's video, I'm going to show you how I use Lightroom and Photoshop to remove anything from an image. So let's kick off over in Lightroom, and straight away we can see in this image that we've got this street light. It's in the way and I want to get rid of it. Now getting rid of things can be really important in shots when you've just got that object which you just can't get rid of. There is a debate about when is right and when is not right to get rid of things. We're not going into that today. I'm just going to show you the tools that I would use when I need to. In this case, I'm going to try and just get rid of this in Lightroom. It should be a fairly straightforward removal for it. So I'm going to use the spot removal tool. Now this is going to bring up two brushes, either clone or heal. Now I'm going to start with clone, see if it can do that. I'm going to use a smallish brush and we're just going to paint over the top of the object, something like this, filling in those gaps, and then bing, it's going to try and replace it with, okay, I think maybe healing would be better, because with cloning, if we just have a little look, you can see that there is like a harsh edge to that cloud. It doesn't blend very well. So maybe if I just click heal, yeah, it's a much better job. Now that just looks like wispy clouds, so the job is done. Could not tell that that was there. On and off, on and off. Perfect. So Lightroom has done a great job. So let's move on to something else. And I think maybe this tree shot, I'm going to try and get rid of this small one in the middle. Now, I really would not get rid of this tree. I love this shot, but just for the sake of doing it, let's give it a go. So again, we're going to bring up our spot removal. I've got it set to heal at the moment. It's probably fine. I'm going to paint over it. Now, you need to make sure that you are getting all of your object. Otherwise, you'll get stray little bits. But also, you don't want to try and get rid of too much of the actual background, too much of what you do want there. So you need to be fairly accurate with your painting. But as you see, I'm just painting around it like this, and then making sure that I'm filling it all in completely. Otherwise, again, you're going to have little bits hovering that shouldn't be there. Then we let go, and it's trying to replace with this bit of mountain over here. So Lightroom, you will need to give it a bit of a helping hand. It's not necessarily going to know exactly what you're looking for. So in this case, we just grab this little dot and we drag it up into the sky to say that's what we want to replace that tree with. And as you can see, it's done it pretty much flawlessly. The issue that we've got is down here at the ground. So in this case, we're going to have to do it again. So I'm going to just drag in another tool like this and bring it over here. And it's sort of got this weird haziness in this color scheme. So let's just go with clone. And that's got rid of it. And that's looking a lot better. But the downside is that it doesn't quite line up in the way that it should do. So what I'm going to do is do a couple of these and bring these in just like this, and then I'm just going to do across here something like that. And if we put that one to heal, that blends in really nicely, and you can see that by building up those brushes, that's now flawless. You can't tell. So it's just taken a couple more goes, but by just doing extra little bits, and when you see it hasn't quite worked, you just try and find a way to correct that bit. And there we go. Before and after, we've moved quite a big bit, and yeah, you can see that it has changed, but when you look at the whole picture, you would never know that that tree was there. There's no sign of it at all. But we have actually, in Lightroom, removed a very big portion of that scene. I think that looks great. So let's try and do something a bit different this time. I really like this scene, but we have got this twig in the foreground that I'd like to see if we can get rid of. Now, this is going to be too difficult for Lightroom, so let's go Edit in, Photoshop, see what we can do over there. First of all, let's just duplicate that background layer so that we're working on a fresh layer. We can always go back. Now, the tool that I'm mostly going to be using is the Spot Healing Brush. And hopefully Photoshop can do a pretty decent job. Now, the thing not to do with the spot healing brush is not just to use a big brush and try and paint over one big area like this. You need to be fairly specific. If you let go of that, then it's actually done a lot better than I thought it would do, but we've still got quite a lot of errors around here. So let's just undo that. The way that I find it's best to work is to do it in small chunks. So we can paint over this bit, and then we can do it again, and you can keep on going. dabbing again and again and just telling it to have another go. And as you can see, with each brush, it just reassesses what should be there and takes those readings from the textures around it, from the other items in the scene. So we can see already that it's pretty much flawlessly got rid of the twig on this side of the rock, which is doing really, really well. So again, it's just about kind of brushing it in a little bit rather than just doing one big spot removal. So we have got a few errors on here. So the next thing we're going to do is use the clone stamp tool, which you can get to just by pressing S on your keyboard. Now this allows you to basically select a bit of area by holding Command and clicking, and then basically painting that area over the top of the thing you want to replace. In this case, I want to try and blend this area down here a little bit more. The way I'm going to do that is by using a low flow, which basically means you can build up the effect. So I can just sort of paint in like this. Because we've got a low flow, it's just slowly building it up. If I did this with 100% flow, let's do the exact same thing. Take a reading from up here and then paint in. It's just a bit much. There's no blend to it. It's actually not too bad in this example, but you see what I mean? It's just a bit heavy-handed. So by turning that down, you can just steadily paint the effect in. So here, take a reading, paint it in, do it again. Keep on doing that. Keep on Command, click, new reading, build it in. You're layering that effect up. You're making it much more realistic, much more natural than just doing it in one big go. And we can start doing the same on these rocks as well. Let's turn that down. Bring back some of that rock detail. On objects like this, it's quite easy to do this sort of replacement using the clone stamp tool, because the textures in the rocks are all completely random. So you can just paint it in and it looks pretty natural. If this was, say, like a checkerboard, then you need to make sure that that pattern is lining up exactly. So it becomes it's much more difficult to do. But here, it's pretty straightforward. And actually, Photoshop has done most of the work for us. I don't really think there's loads more that I'd really want to do. Maybe I could sort of, this bit was a bit bright. It looks like it's standing out a bit too much. Yeah, I mean, this is okay. You know, it's a bit messy. If we turn that off here and then turn it back on, we can see that there is very definitely this thing, but only because we know that there was a twig there. I think if you just sort of looked at the picture like that, you wouldn't know, without having seen the before, that there was anything there. That would just look like rocks, and that's what you need to go for. You need it to just look realistic to someone who hasn't seen the previous version. There is still a little bit more of this twig down here. I'm going to use the clone stamp again. I'm going to take a reading from over here, and then we can just brush that in. It's adding a bit more texture even to that rock, which I quite like. And I can maybe do the same over here with this bit, and maybe just put this in down here too. There we go. And again, got rid of that. It becomes obvious what we've done when you flick it on and off, but you wouldn't know that that twig was there, which is of course the whole point. So now suddenly we've got this picture, twig's gone, it's only taken a few minutes. My next example is with this shot of the iPhone, and it's just a very standard product shot. It's not one I've set up properly. It's just for example for today's video. But the one thing that I would want is to make sure that this right-hand edge here, which is currently just fallen to black, it's a very reflective. So I want to bring in something to make it look reflective, like a reflector. So in this instance, I've used to use a big piece of white polystyrene, but photoshopping that out would be such a headache. So you use what's called a backplate. Now, backplate is when you take a shot without any of the items in, so that you can use that as reference to edit those things out later. So in this case, this would be my backplate effectively, without this big piece of polystyrene in shot. So having those two images makes it very easy to remove, and I'll show you exactly how I do that. Select them both, right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop, not as individual pictures, as stacked layers. So I've got those. It does look like I might have nudged the camera a little bit. So the first thing that's always good to do is select them both, go edit, and just go auto align layers. And I'll just straighten things up, and as I can see, there is a bit of an edge where it's shifted, so it was good to do. Now there are two ways of doing this really. What I'm going to do is put the reflector layer on top, but by using a layer mask we can decide on which bits of this layer we want to be in the shot. Now in this case we want to get rid of this big bit of white, so we can either paint with black over the top of that white layer mask. Remember, with layer masks, a white layer mask means that everything is visible, a black layer mask means that everything is invisible. In this case, starting with white, paint with black, and it just gets rid of that layer. Alternatively, undo that and invert that layer from white to black, therefore hiding everything. And now, with our brush and painting white, we can just paint in that bit of white that we wanted on the phone. We can up the flow a little bit, just make it a bit easier to go in. And there we go. That is all we need to do to edit out effectively that massive bit of white polystyrene in the frame. It's super easy as long as you make sure that you are getting that shot. If we didn't have it, then I'd be having to right now, let's just disable that layer mask, figure out how I can maybe clone stamp from this part of the image and put that over here. Not having to do that, literally just a case of painting it out using layer masks and revealing the layer beneath. Very, very simple, very, very effective. So now we've got that shot. Perfect. Now you can use the same principles if you want to get rid of anything in a scene. If you're shooting a city scene and you want to get a nice empty road, but it's full of cars, full of people, there are ways of doing it without having to just painstakingly paint every single person out. So for example, this shot that I just took as an example, I wanted to get a quiet, empty road, but it's a busy road in the middle of a day. There are cars driving up and down, there are people walking in the shot, very, very difficult, and no matter how long I would have waited, I probably wouldn't have got any point where there was nothing on the road. So the way to do it is to take multiple shots. As those cars and people walk around, you can then use that same method of blending those layers in Photoshop to paint anything you want out of that scene. I'll show you exactly how. I had a quick look and I think that maybe this shot and this one, if I just use these two, because if we have a look here, we've got this VW car. And if I only had the one image, I'd be having to sort of clone stamp a bit of concrete and replace it, and it would take ages. But this shot, the car isn't there, but this one is. But that car isn't here on this one. Do you see what I mean? You know, you've got to make sure that you've got bits of empty space to use in each shot. So let's just take both of these layers, both of these images, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. So again, I was hand holding this, so there will be some shift, a lot of shift actually. So let's just select both of those, edit, auto align layers. Hopefully that should have done a good job of lining things up. Yep, pretty much spot on. So let's just change these again. And I'm going to create a layer mask on this one. And let's just zoom in a little bit on this VW. And again, we've got a white layer mask, so I need to paint black to get rid of bits of it. So I'm swapping my colors and using a soft brush at a fairly low flow, 25%-ish. We're just going to paint that car away. Look at that. We're not having to clone stamp. We're not having to use spot removal. We remove the car. That slow is there underneath. Everything is there just as it should be. Absolutely seamless. And suddenly that car is gone. And we can do the same. We can get rid of this van, which is not there on our layer underneath. This car is, but that car isn't there on this layer. So again, we can zoom right in, much smaller brush this time, and just go around, painting it away, revealing that concrete beneath. Keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. We're almost there. Now that it is a little bit lighter than here, so we're just going to use a bigger brush size and just gently even that out so you won't notice that, so that blend is much more steady and gradual. And there we go. The cars have been removed because we've used those different layers. Put that back on. I mean, there's a couple of other things. We could get rid of this person who's walking here. reduce our brush size, and again, we don't need to do anything, just paint them out. It's great. And maybe this car as well we can get rid of. The other ones aren't going, you know, we could have to do other things to get rid of those. Anything static is obviously a different situation, but there we go. With just by taking one extra photo in this instance, only one, we've been able to completely remove those cars without any weird looking patches. If you want to, you know, try and get a busy street in London, say it's Covent Garden in Christmas, and you want it to be pretty much empty of people, yeah, you'll probably have to take quite a lot of photos to find those empty gaps, but you don't need to individually paint people out. So what's often a good way of doing it is having your camera on a tripod and just firing off maybe 10 or 15 frames, maybe double that, maybe 3 times that over a period of a couple of minutes, and then you can go through and piece that all together. It might take a little bit of time. There probably is a quick way of doing it. I'm almost certain Photoshop's probably got like an action that immediately kind of gets rid of anything that's moving between scenes. Maybe even there's a blending mode. There might be. Maybe exclusion. No, probably not that. But hopefully that's shown you how easy it is to do this sort of thing. So the absolute last thing that I want to show is just a very quick bit of cleanup on one of my product photos. Now, I did a big video recently about how I take some of my product shots on like reflective backgrounds like this, but I'm going to go edit in Photoshop 2021. I'm going to keep this quick. If you want to know more, go and have a look at that other video. But for now, I just want to show you some basic tips for really polishing a shot up. So we're going to start off with the spot healing brush tool, because this is just going to allow me with some of the bigger bits of dust to literally just dot, 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 click over them. We can zoom in, look at that big bit of hair or whatever it is, or we can just paint over and Photoshop, ping, perfect, absolutely seamless. So we can keep doing this on the bigger bits of dust. Don't worry about these tiny little bits. We'll come back to those in a moment. Yeah, we can go through, do it on these bits of hairs. I'm not going to touch all this nonsense up here, then whatever that is that I didn't clean up off my surface beforehand. We'll come back to that one. But the bigger bits, that, all of this nonsense, that can go. Great. Let's consider that done for now. And I'm going to duplicate this layer, and we're going to go to Filter, Noise, Dust and Scratches. Now, dust and scratches, basically, as you can see, smooths out everything in an image. It's way too much to start with. Let's just go with something much less. Go with something around 14, probably looks about fine. No, let's call it 10. It still looks ridiculous on our consoles itself, which is not what we would want to do. But we're going to click OK. And as before, I'm going to use a layer mask in white. I'm going to invert it so that we can't see any of it. So now it's not there. But we can zoom in to these glossy areas now, and pressing B to bring my brush and then painting white to reveal that layer again. We can just paint in that dust removal bit and then just paint over the dust. And look how easy it is to get rid of all that dust. All of it just goes straight away. You can zoom in even more. Smaller brush and just paint in. And it just gets rid of it. Smooths it all out, as you saw how it did it in the other one. Zoom back a little bit. Brush. Bigger brush. Paint, 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 paint. Super easy. I'm not going to do all of it, but you get the idea how easy it is to get rid of all this sort of dust and stuff. It's not about getting every single tiny bit with the spot removal tool. You can use this tool, but if you used it, just applied it to the whole image, as you saw, it looks weird. In particular, where you can't use it is anything where there's texture. So let's look at the controller. We have got this dust. If we just paint that noise reduction layer in, it does this. It gets rid of all that texture. We don't want that at all. So that is a point where we would have to use the spot healing brush, because that will replicate that texture, but it does it easily, and it's pretty quick, as you can see. It does take some time. You just have to sit down, put a podcast on, and go through and do it. Up here, things are a little bit different, because there is so much of this that that layer didn't really do enough. So what we're going to have to do is duplicate this layer, and I'm going to put it over the top. I'm going to go back into noise, dust and scratches, but this time I'm going to add a lot more until it's basically at a point where it's gone, which is around, that's looking okay at about 20. And again, layer mask, invert it, and then use a bigger brush this time, much bigger brush. And I can zoom out. Oops. Yeah. Zoom out. And then with that big brush, we can just paint onto this. There's no texture in this anyway, so we're not getting rid of textures or details on the products. We're just getting rid of that weird bit of stuff. And we can do the exact same thing on this side, and all of a sudden we've got a much more polished, much more professional looking product image. But that has not taken hours of retouching to get rid of every single little bit. It's taken a few minutes just cleverly using the different tools. So that brings me to an end of this video. I really hope that it's been useful to see how I would use the different tools in Lightroom and in Photoshop on my photos, both professionally with things like the product photography on like the consoles that we've just seen, but also for my personal work. They're really, really powerful tools, and if you use them well, they can really, really help your work. If you have enjoyed this video, do please hit that like button. Certainly, please do consider subscribing if you don't already, and I will see you next time.